This game started out as a test bench for the game made with Game Concept, which is a run and gun RPG shooter type of game, and I had this idea for this USP in the game for the more damage you take, the less accurate your gun is and the faster you run. But with playtesting, I understood that for what I'm creating here, which isn't a fully fledged game, and with actually seeing how the game played, I understood that maybe I wanted to make something a bit different. So I created a duel scenario between you and a blue cube of death, which plays out in a very aerial and fast-paced way. I kept the randomic shooting, spraying of bullets as in the original game, but I added in the fact that it's fixed now. The aerial aspects of the game are very strong, and this is a blue cube of death, which is exceptionally aggressive and much more dangerous than you will ever be. And so the main thing about the game is tricking the AI in any way possible, because as soon as he sees you, you're basically dead unless you manage to get away very, very quickly. And this is a game that I've been working on for the past semester, and there were many ups and downs in the development of the game. I had lots of issues with lots of different aspects, but in the end I managed to create the game, and I'm very proud of what I've created. One of the things I was the most interested in, at least especially at the beginning of this exam, was inter-script communication and timings, which are two things that I experimented with many different ways of doing them. Like, for example, timings, I use both invoke in certain parts, I use an if statement with time.time in another one, and I've been trying to find ways to put in timings on everything and communicate between scripts, mainly for tidiness sake, so I have all of my parameters on the enemy game object and the player game object in their respective controllers. Talking about controllers, the player controller is both a controller and a group of booleans and floats mainly, and a few ints, even though my main parameters that I prefer to use are booleans and floats. I use the new Unity input system, as that way I could get a very good aiming function with the get vector. Then I use the get angle from vector float that I found online to get the precise angle from my right stick. So going all through all of this, what's interesting in my player is mainly the player cone and the player shoot. Player cone, I had to learn how to generate meshes, which was a lot more complicated than I had initially thought, but in the end I managed to make it work and rotate thanks to the player controller also, and the communication between the two of them. Instead, player shoot, I wanted to create these random projectiles that shot between two values, which are minus cowardice angle divided by 2 and plus cowardice angle divided by 2. And I did this by using quaternions and transforming first the bullet and rotating the bullet, and then giving the bullet an impulse based on its local transform. Then in this case, for example, I used a coroutine with an IE numerator to have to add in a delay effect as well, just to experiment with different ways to delay actions. Instead, in the enemy controller, I once again have all of my parameters set up, and here this is mainly a state machine using 4 states: patrol, chase, attack, and dead, and the switching between them is aided extensively by private floats and bools that are used only in this function to switch between them. I'll start off by explaining how I switch between all of my states in the update. So to detect the enemy, the player in that case, I use both a distance to player, which is a distance, and a raycast. I use them both because with a raycast I can have the initial attack, and then with the distance I can switch back into the troll state if the player is out of view. I also use distance as being a very aerial and fast game if the raycasts aren't always easy to come by, especially if both me and if the player and the enemy are both jumping around like crazy. Player attack, it's based off the player scene bool and a distance to player less than attack range, and also other booleans that help make everything work much better without as many bugs at the beginning. I have managed to bug fix the game. It's all working very well right now, but thanks to a long list of booleans that keep everything in check. So I switch states if the player is too close, and using a double function because this fixed a bug I was having, and then if too much time passes, the enemy tired will be invoked, which allows me to have the enemy fix itself if it gets stuck somewhere, because the patrol function is very strong at moving around the world as well as the chase function. Instead, if I'm alive is false, the enemy simply switches state to dead and you win the game. So the single states here, raycasts, this is just a raycast, and it modifies the player scene bool. And instead, for player scene switches state. Player escape is a bit more interesting. I added in a delay here as well using the time.time. And this allows me to wait a certain amount of time, continuing to chase until or the enemy gets away, or the player is too close and the enemy will start chasing again actively. Well, continue chasing actively. Patrolling is pretty straightforward. Turn around when there's a wall and go to the ground when there's no ground. Chasing is uses the facing direction that was also used in Patrol, for using though a relative position to the player to decide which facing direction to use. And here there's the function for wall running, as the enemy can wall run as well. Once the chase is over, the enemy will flip around, so it's clear to the player and it's telegraphed that the enemy is no longer chasing. For the attack state, as soon as the enemy attacks, it will jump into the air, and then after a certain amount of time, start attacking the player until it hits the player, which means that it will be stunned for a certain amount of time, so that the player has enough time to run away. Enough time, by that I mean 1 or 2 seconds, to get away. And right now in the playtest I think it's 1 second, just to make it a bit more aggressive. And the HP system and the menu systems, these are into scripts, but the menu system is made via events that I learned from Unity tutorials, and also the HP system from multiple Unity tutorials. I managed to build it up. One of the main modifications I did to the Unity tutorial for the health system is A, connect it into my state machines, and B is also to have my health bars connected directly to an empty object on my game objects, because that way I have much more control on where it exactly is placed. Okay, I had especially a hard time on the shooting function in conjunction with the player controller, as the first managing to make the random shoot projectiles wasn't working for a long time, and then also when I attached it to the player controller, it broke, and it took a lot of work to manage to get back up and running. Also, the enemy controller took a while to refine and make it work as I want. If I could redo the whole project from the start, I'd probably use a consistent invoke system instead of using if time is bigger than current time, which is a bit more. I think invoke is a bit more elegant, and I'd have to rewrite parts of code to make it work better with the invoke statement. Also, I'd use less get components, and I'd use the event handler a lot more if I could do it again, because I think the event handler is a lot more clean as far as the code goes, even though how it is built right now is fully functional. I'd also love to add in different types of weapons and enemies and skills apart from dash, so to make it a bit more, spice it up a bit. But right now, as a tech demo almost, I think that it's completely satisfying for what I was going for.